Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
You are listening to the TrekRanks podcast, a member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. This is episode 17, featuring the top 5 pop culture references. Welcome, Star Trek fans. I am Jim Moorhouse, and I am the host of the TrekRanks podcast. And today we have yet another one of our very special deep cut topics. I just can't resist them. I love any topic that really makes us dive deep and makes us rack our brain and makes us just think about all things Trek. So today we're going to discuss our top 5 pop culture references in Star Trek. And by that, we're basically defining that by, we're talking about modern or semi-modern pop culture references that appeared in Trek. And that's as opposed to the flip of that, which would be real world reverse Trek references in shows like Saturday Night Live or when Mad Men had a great Trek reference. So it's not that, it's pop culture reference that occurred in the show. So a quick, easy example that I've been giving that would be a good example of that is recently on Discovery when Lieutenant Stamets mentioned the Beatles, which is the first Trek reference of the Beatles, I believe, and our guest will be able to clarify that for me. I know, but I'm pretty sure it was the first Beatles reference. So, and, as you start thinking about it, there's actually quite a few once you start diving into it. So, and as I said, we like any topic that requires some serious Trek brainstorming. The TrekRanks podcast loves deep cut picks. So anyway, this is going to be a great show, and it'll be made even greater by the fact that we're being joined by an amazing guest tonight. He's so amazing that he is the only guest we are having on the show, so I can be really selfish and maximize his contributions all to myself. He's a legendary Star Trek fan, collector, and historian, a true scholar and a gentleman, and it is our distinct honor to welcome to TrekRanks for the first time, Mr. John Tenuto. John, welcome to the show, buddy.
Oh, thank you, Jim. I appreciate it, and I'll get you that check for that introduction next week.
Yeah, I think it is. I didn't actually search it. I could have, but I don't think there's been a Beatles reference, other than the Inner Light, of course.
Yeah, there was the USS Sutherland in Redemption, where they're on Data's ship. It's one of those things where you say, well, how are we going to define this, right? So that you're exactly right. When Stamets talks about his Uncle Everett, it's the very first verbal reference to the Beatles. But if you look real closely on the USS Sutherland's dedication plaque, their slogan is "There will be an answer, let it be."
So this is why John Tenuto is on the show. That is spectacular. And by the way, that is my favorite all-time TNG episode. So I love that. Redemption, Part 2.
That is great.
Fantastic. All right, so we've been looking forward to having you on. And normally we ask each guest about their Trek origin story. So I want to hear that from you, but I also want to hear a little bit about your historical research on Trek and how that started. How'd you get into that? Give us your backstory.
Sure. Well, I became a fan of Star Trek in the 1970s. I was born when Star Trek was on, but I was a little too young to. I was very young in order to see it in first run. But I became a fan very quickly in the early 70s, around 1972, 1973, and it was really my in a way the animated show, and my mother going to what in Chicago people will recognize the Goblatz and Montgomery Ward's bargain basement that they used to have, where it was like sort of a clearinghouse or warehouse for toys. And my mother had bought me the Mego Enterprise set when I was a little bit older, and all the figures and so on. And that's really my introduction to Star Trek, was through the animated show and then through the toys, and then from there watching the reruns during the 1970s. But I think I really became, in my mind, I became a fan where it became a tremendously important part of my life was when I saw The Wrath of Khan. That summer I was going to be going away to California and spending the summer with my brother to just have a little bit of a different kind of summer. And so my parents and I we did some things together, and one of the things I said was, well, why don't we go see the Star Trek movie, because I like Star Trek. But I didn't realize I was going on opening night. It was June 4th, 1982, and I went to the Esquire Theater, and I fell in love with the whole, not only the movie, but the whole fandom around the movie. Everybody standing in line, and people, so back then, in costumes and talking about the movie, and that really opened my eyes to the world of both Star Trek and to fandom. And that's where I think a seed was planted in terms of the research that my wife and I would eventually do, where we became very, very interested in two sides of Star Trek. One is we became interested in the fan subculture, and the other side of it was we became very interested in the people behind the scenes who make Star Trek despite the limitations of time or budget or special effects technology or censorship or whatever it happens to be. And yet they're able to create this really great piece of Americana and now worldwide phenomenon through those limitations. And so that's really where a lot of our research is focused. We are very fortunate to be able to interact with many of the behind the scenes people who've been very generous in opening up their archives or library resources for us, because really our goal, and I think we make that really clear to people, our goal is so that when fellow fans watch the credits of a Star Trek episode or a movie, the names of the people mean something, and their contributions are more than just sort of, well, art director, but what does that really mean? And so we've been very, very fortunate to be able to get involved in looking at all the archives and the behind the scenes information and the memos and just really do very what we would call today deep dives into the making of Star Trek, particularly focused on Nicholas Meyer's work, but also just Star Trek in general. And so that's been a really great treat. And we get to share our research at conventions and through articles at StarTrek.com. So that's kind of our world into Star Trek.
I love it. I mean, some of the nuggets you guys have come up with are so incredible and fascinating, and love seeing you guys at conventions. So hopefully we'll see it more.
Yeah, we're very excited. We got some new stuff that we just did on. Interestingly, before Discovery started, and we knew that Sarek would be on or Mudd would be on, we had done a look at how those characters were originally conceived and spoke with people like D.C. Fontana, who wrote some of those characters. And Mudd is very important because Mudd is a Gene Roddenberry creation, created even before the show was on. So that's our next big reveal. We'll be sharing all those details with fellow fans at conventions and eventually with some really great articles, we hope, at StarTrek.com.
That's great. All right. Well, it's a true honor to have you on the show, and I've honestly been looking forward to it for a long time. So
thank you.
Let's get into this. So, all right, before we get rolling, let's power up the Argus array so our listeners know exactly how they can message us.
Hailing frequencies are open.
All right, so you can check us out on the World Wide Web at TrekRanks.com and at the TricorderTransmissions.com. And if you'd like to leave us a message with your own picks, you can do that at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527. And I will give you that number again at the end of the show. You can also find the Tricorder Transmissions on Facebook. And for those of you enjoying all of our shows here on the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network, including Shore Leave and Disco Trek with Heather Barker and Politirex, you also just might want to become a Patreon of our shows, which you can do at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And finally, you can reach me on Twitter at TrekRanks and also at Enterprise Extra. So hopefully we'll hear from you because, as I say every week, this show is better when we hear from you. So to wrap it up, John, would you like to tell everyone how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. A great way to get in touch with me is through Twitter, and I'm at Tenuto Family. That's Tenuto, Tenuto Family. That's my wife and my account. We share a lot of our little nuggets and when new articles pop up and stuff through Twitter. So that's a great way to chat. I'd love to meet fellow fans and talk.
So many good bits of info there. Follow at Tenuto Family if you aren't already and you're a Trek fan. It's fantastic. So, all right, before we get started, just a quick reset on general order number 1 here at TrekRanks. And as a starting point, we quite literally, my favorite thing to do in the world is to talk about Star Trek. I'm always up for that, just like you just said. So we started TrekRanks just to get that conversation started, and we do it by ranking Trek via some deep dive topics. And hopefully when you listen, you'll have some fun with it and maybe think about a few episodes or ideas that you haven't thought about for a while. And nothing would make me happier than if someone listening right now ends up going back to watch some old episodes because of the conversation we are about to have. So as my good friend, the Vulcan Master, likes to remind us each week, the main driver for our discussion here at TrekRanks podcast is
infinite diversity.
In infinite combinations.
That's right. Our mantra here is no wrong answers. It's not about being right or definitive in any way. It's just about sharing the things we love about Star Trek. And it's definitely not about nitpicking the things we don't like. So that's not our thing here. So you won't find any of that here. Bottom line, we love all Trek from TOS to TNG, straight through to Enterprise and the Kelvin timeline, and now Discovery. It's all fair game here on the TrekRanks podcast.
Black alert. Black alert. Black alert. Black alert.
And again, just time for our quick Discovery reset since we now have new Trek airing as we record these episodes. So first off, just a reminder that Discovery is in play for all these selections. So that means potential Discovery spoilers could be revealed. And also just a reminder that tonight's Trek Rank is current through Season 1, Episode 9 of Discovery, or through the so-called first chapter of Season 1. I like giving that kind of that benchmark of where we are in Trek as we have this Discovery. So in case you're listening to it years from now, so in some temporal vortex. All right. Oh, and one other reminder, I always say that episodes is our shorthand term. So the 13 films are obviously also in play for all of our selections. So, John, were you able to get all that through your duotonic processors? Does that make sense?
I got it. I'm ready.
All right. All right. Then I'm ready to. Let's have Chief O'Brien fire up our level 1 diagnostic.
Diagnostic cycle will be complete in 20 seconds.
Okay. So in tonight's diagnostic cycle, I want to take a few minutes to define this topic a little bit, kind of as a starting point. So basically, as I said before, any kind of 19th, 20th, 21st century pop culture reference that appeared in Trek is in play. It could be a song, a play, a book, a TV show, a historical figure. It could be anything as long as you want to argue for it. So, and, again, if you want to go back to even, before the 20th century and go back to Shakespeare or Brahms or Conan Doyle, all of that is in play as a pop culture references. And just wanted to note that the references, they can be real world examples or something that's just made up for Trek, like a certain holodeck program fancied by one Mr. Tom Paris. So John, did the broad definition, did that cast a wide enough net for you? How did you look at this thing?
Well, it's funny. It was difficult because I kind of made some rules to myself within that. But you're exactly right. There's always a challenge with defining what we mean by popular culture, even in the world of sociology, which is what I teach in. And so, technically, holidays like Thanksgiving are part of popular culture. As you had said, books and people themselves can become iconic and therefore can become popular culture icons. And there's this distinction in sociology, and I don't know how useful it is anymore, but we used to have the idea of popular culture and what we used to call elite culture. And so elite culture was Shakespeare, but that was always that was a bad definition because at the time Shakespeare was popular culture. In fact, that's why Shakespeare is in colleges. It's taught in colleges because at the time when the sort of modern university systems were being created, Shakespeare was just basically, Jerry Springer. I mean, everyone knew Shakespeare. The peasant knew Shakespeare. That's why the theaters were set up that way. They had the cheap seats and they had the expensive seats because it really crossed a lot of different sort of social boundaries. So, it's helpful to have that the opera is elite culture, but Friends is popular culture. But it's hard to say when you've got something like Shakespeare or Sherlock Holmes that starts crossing over into those realms that what is what anymore. So that was a challenge, kind of saying what I was going to pick and what I wasn't going to pick, and what I would allow and what I wouldn't allow. Just to make the list get down to 5 was a challenge.
Yeah, that's an interesting broad spectrum. I knew that's why I wanted to have it just include literally everything, basically. I mean, historical culture in some way. And one interesting thing for me was that, so sometimes when I think about pop culture references in Trek, in some ways I can think they can be a little bit of a dangerous or a bad thing, because it can date the show or take you out of it if it's too flip or current or not long lasting. So I think one of the smartest things that Gene Roddenberry did and the producers of Trek over the years have done is they really made sure that modern references in Trek, it didn't happen super often because it can date the show, but I just think they were really discreet in that area and used it discerningly in a way that really helped build the believability of the Trek world building. So.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was thinking a lot of times when you look at these references, anything that's current tends to be like almost a hidden in joke. So there are like Back to the Future references, or there are Cheers references, but you either have to pause the screen and read an acoudogram, or read about it in a book. They're really never in sort of in dialogue or in a major part of the episode. They really kept a lot of the pop culture references tended to be past pop culture references, so that the show, as you said, wouldn't necessarily be dated. But I think that the pop culture references in Star Trek are really important because they, Star Trek is us, right? I mean, that makes it different than Star Wars. Star Wars isn't us. Star Wars is another galaxy. These are not people from Earth. These are not our ancestors. Even Battlestar Galactica, which, never really specifies, at least the classic one, never really specifies, are these our descendants, or are these our ancestors? We don't know. Star Trek, absolutely, without a doubt, everybody in Star Trek are our great-grandchildren. At least the humans, or half humans, are our great-grandchildren. And so to have those references really helps to, I think, strengthen that concept that they are from us, that these are us in the future. We can become these people. And we know that because the Beatles exist. I mean, it's so therefore this is where we can be. And I think that's an important element. But you're right. You don't want to have a reference to, a TV show or something like that that's on right now, because that can become a problem.
Yeah, I always think, and even something like if you like, there's Watergate references in Trek, but if you reference Barry Goldwater, people are gonna be like, "What are they talking about?"
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to be discerning in that area, and I think they did a really good job of that. And I love your point about the hidden references. That might be another topic for another Trek Ranks, because there are a lot of good ones there too. So, all right, let's jump into our Prime Directive so we can talk about how we narrowed down our list.
I do not concur with your captain's decision.
She's following our Prime Directive.
Define Prime Directive.
All right, John. So you talked about a little bit there in the Diagnostic Cycle about how broad this topic was and how tough it was for you to narrow down the specific criteria you used to narrow down your list. So tell me about how did you do that?
Okay, I had three ways I did it. Three sort of rules of Prime Directives that I followed. The one was, except for one exception, which I think is okay because
we love exceptions.
Yeah, I have an exception.
We love exceptions.
But I think it's okay because it's an exception, but it's not an exception. It had to be a real world. In other words, a real example. So I shied away from anything where they reference like a 21st century, a 23rd century poet or something like that.
Got it. Yeah.
That was one way I limited it. Another way was that while my inclination was to go, they mentioned Superman and I love Superman, I didn't do what were necessarily like references of things I liked. I did references to popular culture that I felt somehow revealed something important about either the characters or the narrative. And so it had to be something where it was important to our understanding of those. And then my third thing was I limited myself only to 19th and 20th century popular culture, only because I felt if I started to go further back, then that's almost another show doing like Shakespeare references. So I limited myself solely to those in the 19th and 20th centuries.
All right. I love that Prime Directive. So when you, really quick, did you have, how do you feel like your list was really long and tough to narrow down, or did you kind of?
Oh yeah, because I mean, what I found was it was almost like I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm too heavy on music, musical references, or I'm too heavy on, in joke kind of references, and so I felt like I needed to make it be more important and varied, and that the three criteria helped me do that.
Awesome. So yeah, for mine, I will say I immediately knew what my number one was going to be, and it was actually kind of the impetus for why I even came up with this topic. So I think as a pop culture reference, it's kind of sneaky. It's but it's also really in your face, but you don't really realize it. So I really like it for that reason. But I'll get to that when we get to the order of things.
Awesome.
But overall, my first thought on this topic was that it might be too niche a little bit, and just maybe wasn't going to work. But once I started thinking about it, my list just kept growing and growing, and it was tough to narrow down. So I'm going to have a lot of secondary systems. But my Prime Directive was similar to what you said, where I wanted it to be integral to the show or the episode and the plot line, and have a little bit of depth in the story, and not just be kind of a throwaway line. So so that was my basic thing. And I in terms of the media element, I had that thought too, that I don't want to be too heavy in one medium, but I may have ended up a little heavy in one medium. but my long list had everything, so I just chose the ones that I thought were the most prominent and fun.
Oh, so awesome! Can't wait.
All right, very much looking forward to this conversation, and I will say again that we may have some duplicates. You never know. We may not. It's only two of us, so we'll see. But if we do have some duplicates, you'll hear this sound. And we love those defiant torpedoes. So, all right, let's get Third Romaticlon in here, and it's time for the order of things.
I am a Jem'Hadar. He is a Vorta. It is the order of things.
Thank you, Third Romaticlon. All right. Once again, as we go through the order of things, here's a quick reminder on how we're going to do that. So first, each of us will reveal our 5-word summary and a hashtag, which is our normal TrekRanks staple, just to tease our pick. Then we'll reveal our pop culture reference and the episode title in which it appeared, and we'll talk through it a little bit. And then at the end, we'll run through some secondary system selections for the picks that just missed our list. And as I said before, I have a lot of those. So, all right, John, let's get this rolling. What's your number 5 pick for a pop culture reference in Star Trek?
Okay, I chose for number 5, Captain Proton.
The Adventures of Captain Proton. Chapter 18, Bride of Chaotica. The evil Dr. Chaotica kidnaps Constance Goodhart and plans to sacrifice her to Arachnia, Queen of the Spider People. Captain Proton travels millions of miles to Planet X, where he will invade the Fortress of Doom. Chaotica fires his fiendish death ray. Certain death for Proton as his rocket ship bursts into flames.
We didn't burst into flames in the last chapter. Why are these recaps always so inaccurate?
Well, they brought people back to the theaters.
Fantastic.
So I got, okay, I just have, my hashtags are really bad. But
no such thing. There's no such thing.
I have Captain Proton teaches us Paris. That's my hashtag. And the reason was the episode, there's 9 different episodes that reference Captain Proton. And the two I think most significant are Knight and Bride of Chaotica. And I thought that they were important. Of course, they're riffing on Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and Commander Cody and Captain Video and the Video Rangers and the 1930s sci-fi serials. Of course, I got excited because Tom Paris treats it as sociology. He actually uses the word. So anytime they use sociology, I get excited. But to me, it's a great important element of who Tom Paris is as a character and where Tom Paris begins his arc or his journey in Caretaker and then winds up in Future's End. So in Endgame. And so this his love affair with the past, our past and his past, and sort of 20th century Earth, I think is a unique element to him. Trip Tucker has a little bit of that too, I think, with his movie nights. But so that's kind of a unique feature that only Tom Paris is the one who's really a 20th century historian, pop culture expert. And when, in fact, the original script to Caretaker has a scene that was never filmed, but was written by Michael Piller, where when Janeway comes to visit Tom Paris in the rehabilitation facility and convince him to join her as an advisor on her mission to find Tuvok, there's a scene where him and her go for hot dogs. And he orders a hot dog, and he talks about being a purist, so he only has mustard on his hot dog. And they edited it. They took that scene out, but it really was. It showed us right away that they were thinking of this character as being this kind of 20th century person in a way in the future. And I think when you look at his arc, I love it because he starts off being, he's just doing Captain Proton because it's fun and he loves going there. But in Endgame, when there's a moment where Harry asks him to join him, and go do this dangerous thing, and Tom doesn't want to do it. He's reluctant, and Harry throws up to him. He's Captain Proton wouldn't shriek from this adventure, and Tom has a great line, which is Captain Proton doesn't have a wife and a kid on the way. And I thought, well, that was a nice sort of arc for him through his popular culture references to see him grow and mature. And so that's why I thought Captain Proton teaches us about Paris.
Well, I love that 5 words. It does teach us about Paris. He does have an unbelievable story arc through the 7 years. I did not know that about that Caretaker scene. That's fascinating that they had that pegged so early.
Oh gosh,
with his backstory. That's great.
Yeah, we have a talk we did it a couple of years ago at Vegas, but about how the script and the characters were created, and I'll tell you, they really knew the heart of these characters pretty early, and it's amazing. And I think in some ways that's why a lot of people feel like Voyager, there's a lot of connection there and emotion to the characters, because the characters are so well defined. And I think you could see that right from the start, and even in their notes when their names are different, and they're not quite sure of the ages or who the characters are, what species they are, that the heart of these characters were there really from the very beginning.
Yeah. Well, I love this pick, which you'll see in a moment. So real quick, what you mentioned Knight and Bride of Chaotica. So which episode did you pick?
I chose the reference Bride of Chaotica, because I think that really you really explore Tom's relationship with Captain Proton and with the 20th century and his fascination with the past in that one. So it would definitely be Bride of Chaotica.
All right. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. His Army of Evil. One of my all-time favorite lines. All right. Well, I needed to clarify that because we almost had a duplicate. So my number 5 pick, and it's a little bit different. So I'll do my 5 words and a hashtag. Citizen of Earth, surrender. Hashtag delete this guy. So my episode is Knight from season 5, episode 1 of Voyager. And my pick is Satan's Robot.
Awesome.
I could have chosen Captain Proton here, but I decided to go with Satan's Robot because he just makes me laugh. He's brilliant. He's a perfect encapsulation of mid-20th century sci-fi, and I'm a huge fan of old school sci-fi from that era. So I just love this character. And the scene I chose, which again I love, is from Knight when Paris asks Seven to come along, and instead of playing along with the program with Satan's robot, when Satan's robot shows up, she just opens his hatch and pulls out all his wires and shuts him down. And
now, when we last saw our heroes, they'd just retaken their rocket ship. Dr. Chaotica had escaped, but he left behind his trusty robot to foil Captain Proton.
My designation.
All right. You're Constance Goodhart. You're my secretary.
Secretary.
Yeah, you tag along on all the missions. Now, I want you to keep the robot occupied while I save Earth. Computer, run program.
Citizen of Earth, surrender. Do not resist.
I am Borg.
Surrender.
The robot has been neutralized. May I leave now?
Come on, Seven. Give it a chance. The galaxy's at stake.
So great. Love that scene.
That is awesome.
And one of my other favorite things about Satan's robot is that he is actually based on an actual robot design featured in a few movies in the 50s, most prominently Zombies of the Stratosphere, featuring none other than the great Leonard Nimoy in one of his early acting roles. So I love that full circle with good old Satan's robot. I have no idea if they designed it that way when they did it and they chose that as a homage, but for me that was always very cool. So
they did a great job with Captain Proton and the whole world of Captain Proton. Yeah,
the whole world is really good. So yeah, I love when I think Paris says, if I ever get this program back online, the first thing I'm going to do is delete this guy. Robot, delete this guy. Love that scene. And I can't believe we have round 5 is basically Captain Proton round. Fantastic. All right, let's move on to your number 4 pick. What do you got, John?
Okay, number 4, my 5 words are gambling, or Vegas gambling in Trek style. That's my 5 words. And it has to do with the use of gambling in Star Trek. And the episode I chose was Bada Bing, Bada Bang.
Ooh, 19. Let's see if you can beat that. 23, you're busted.
Winner 17 black. 10,000. Good luck, sir. No coming. Make your bets. Here they go. Zini. Hilo bets.
$100?
Too much?
Well, you're supposed to be a high roller, so start rolling and make it 2,000.
2,000.
What do you say we blow some of my money at the crap tables?
Maybe later. Right now, I want you to buy me a drink.
Gambling, of course, is a big part of Star Trek from the very beginning. You could have a Corbomite maneuver. You have really, we know who Kirk is as a character in that very, very early episode because of his switch from chess to poker, and his ability to trick the enemy and just seeing Kirk that way. And so that gambling motif carries through all of all the versions of Star Trek. Next Gen, of course, with the famous poker games and the whole just idea of gambling. But I thought that the Deep Space Nine episode, where they recreate Las Vegas on the holodeck in the 1960s, was a really important episode, not only because it gave us sort of insight into the characters. It was sort of their Trouble with Tribbles, a fun episode, but it also had a really great Star Trek social commentary about how Las Vegas in the 1950s and before was not a place that was welcoming to everybody. They sort of had Vegas was split into two communities. There was the West Side where African Americans were segregated, and then you had sort of the Strip and that area. And African Americans would be allowed to work at hotels, but couldn't gamble at them. And even famous people like Nat King Cole and Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald, they were ushered in the back and did their performance and ushered out the back. They were not allowed in what they called the front of the house. And that would change in 1955. There was a hotel called the Moulin Rouge that really was the first sort of attempt to desegregate gambling in Vegas. And that I thought showing you Avery Brooks's, that his addition to the script and him asking them to add that to the script. It's not a major part of the script, but it's an important moment that elevates that episode and shows how popular culture can be used to teach historical lessons. And I thought that was a great point and a great use of that sort of frequent gambling motif in Star Trek.
Yeah, it's a brilliant pick. I love this concept. It covers so much, whether it's TNG and the poker game, the routine poker games, which they were gambling. There were chips on the table, and they cared if they won or lost. And then, of course, Fizbin, which is
absolutely
the ultimate. Yeah, that is. I love this pick. I'm trying to think of any Voyager gambling or Enterprise.
Well, they had the race. They had races, right? Neelix would gamble on. Neelix and Tom would sort of try to show each other up on their con games and their gambling games and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
They really did carry it through. Through most of the versions of Star Trek. So it was great.
That's pretty great. And Sunkatse as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right. So awesome pick. All right. So my number 4, I'm not sure how I keep ending up singing on TrekRanks. I'm a terrible singer. But we're going to do it. Here we go. Anything for the show. So my 5 words in a hashtag is: a British tar is a soaring soul. Hashtag as free as a mountain bird. I love Star Trek Insurrection. I don't care what anyone says. It's an awesome movie. I think it's an awesome 2-hour episode of Trek. I think the story works. I think the casting is top-notch, and I think the humor works. And this scene with Picard, Worf, and Data singing a British tar, I love it. It's awesome Trek. It's smart. It's funny. It's action-packed. I love watching those 2 shuttles soaring through the lower atmosphere on their dogfight. I just love this scene. I think it works on so many levels and has just some real heart and humor to it. And the Gilbert and Sullivan layer on top of that. Pretty sure that's 19th century, by the way. Yeah, that's my pick. What do you think of that one?
Well, I'll tell you, you're not going to get any disagreement with me about Insurrection. I love Insurrection. In fact, we just got at an auction Jonathan Frakes' notes and memos about Insurrection, and we're going to be doing a lot of research on Insurrection. We love Michael Pillar's book that's out now finally called Fade In. That's about the writing of Insurrection. That is Star Trek. I mean, in many ways, that is, Star Trek's lots of things. There is no one thing Star Trek is.
Of course.
But I think it's identifiably has a lot of the elements that we all agree kind of make Star Trek what it is. Now, some people may say, well, it wasn't this successful here or that, but I love it. My wife and I, in fact, for our honeymoon 20 years ago, went and spent time among the Amish. That's what we did for our honeymoon. And so, the Baku are Amish in space. I mean, so what's not to love?
Wow.
So
amazing.
But I love the whole theme of the film and the humor. And you're so right that it was important, I think, after First Contact to have a lighter film, but yet one that wasn't a comedy, but it was a little lighter and showed people enjoying themselves. And that's a great scene where you get the idea they're still doing, they don't have the time in the movies to show us necessarily them doing plays on the Enterprise like they did when it was a series, but that idea that they are still doing plays and Data had been singing that a few weeks ago. In a production of Pinafore, that I thought was a great reference.
Exactly. I love the way it's actually integrated in an intelligent way to moving that storyline along. I just think they did a great job with that. I always say this, people have heard me say it before, that all I've ever wanted from the movies is a great 2-hour episode, because Trek on TV is what I'm all about. So sometimes the movies have to be bigger and grander, so they don't always connect with me as much as, a random 2-hour episode. And I just felt walking out of Insurrection like I just watched an awesome high budget 2-hour episode of TNG, and that made me me love it. So
yeah, and it's not, the Earth in danger, which is often which we understand as in the film world maybe a necessity for a general audience, but that one was great because you didn't have that kind of stake. The stakes were more about population transfer and the heart of the Federation and the small group of people and why they mattered.
Yep. Agreed. All right, one more. His nose should pant, and his lips should curl. His cheek should flame, and his brow should furl.
And you get to see Worf sing. Worf singing is always good.
Yeah, I am not familiar with the new crew, Captain. All right, let's move on to the soup round. What's your number 3 pick, John?
Okay, number 3 is my 5 words are Alice in Star Trek Land. That is 5, I think. Alice in Star Trek. Yeah, okay, that's good. I want to make sure about that. And so
you can cheat. Yeah, you can go to 6, 7 words. We don't care. We're not counting.
And so the idea there is, Shore Leave was the episode, and it's our very first sort of important reference to Alice in Wonderland that becomes again a major theme throughout many different Star Treks. We get Spock referencing it again in the animated show Once Upon a Planet, talking about his mom. Being a fan of Lewis Carroll, of course, that comes back to revisit us in Context is for Kings with Discovery and Michael and her relationship with that book and using that as a bridge of friendship between her and Tilly, and also as a centering or kind of humanizing part of her as she struggles with what it means to be a human being. She laps on to what her adopted mother read to her. Kirk makes a lot of references to Alice in Wonderland. Also, there's the reference in Star Trek IV when he, welcomes Jillian on board with, welcome Alice to Wonderland. And he also mentions it in I, Mud and tells Chekhov that we're going to take Alice through a trip through Wonderland. I mean, there's so many Picard, references the Curiouser and Curiouser and Royale. So there's all these references, even the Wrath of Khan novel, although it's never in the movie and it's really an invention only of the author of the novel. But in the novel, you've got Regular One personnel talking a lot about Lewis Carroll. And so it's a really big part of Star Trek. And of course, Shore Leave, that's our first introduction to it. And we get to see the awesome rabbit, and we see Alice, and it begins to our journey into the mystery of what this planet is all about. So it was a great reference, I think. Of course, that's 1865, so it gets a little bit further back, but it works. It works.
I love that rabbit. I don't care what anybody says.
It's great. I loved it when I was a kid. It was it was awesome.
Oh, my paws and whiskers. I'll be late.
Excuse me, sir. Have you seen a rather large white rabbit with a yellow waistcoat and white gloves hereabout? Thank you very much.
This pig, so inspired. Every once in a while at TrekRanks, we get the right guest on the right topic, and holy cow, we have done that today. That is such a good pick, and it's layered throughout Trek. I mean, literally just to our latest incarnation with Context is for Kings is my favorite Discovery episode, far and away. I just thought it was incredible, and the Alice in Wonderland stuff at the end of that is just inspired.
I love how Discovery is teaching us about Spock without showing us Spock. So I think Lethe really did that, where you sort of go, oh, okay, I get it now. Now I get why Sarek. It wasn't just Sarek was mad because Sarek wanted his kid to go to school. Sarek was mad because he sacrificed one of his kids for another kid, and then that kid doesn't take take what he does. And so anything where they're kind of helping us understand Spock a little better. And so, now we can imagine sort of Spock hearing Alice in Wonderland when he was a little boy and his mother's influence. And I think that that's great. And that helps us appreciate Michael and also Spock.
Agreed. Just inspired. I love it. All right. So we're going to go from Alice in Wonderland to a Daffy Duck reference.
Awesome.
So my 5 words in a hashtag is a television set circa 1956, and the episode is Memorial from Voyager's season 6, episode 14. And I just love this scene when B'Elanna gives Tom Paris a TV set. I just think well, first of all, Memorial is a great and underrated episode. And for me, this pop culture reference, I love how integral it is to the setup of the show, where it's great that B'Elanna's surprising him with this thoughtful gift, and then he's immediately excited about it. He's watching cartoons. He's playing with his remote control. Elliot Ness and the Untouchables come on. And by the way, B'Elanna, I love that she says she replicated all the parts and assembled the TV herself because of course she did. She's not just going to replicate the TV. So anyway, I love how integral it became with the episode, because here's this opening where they're having fun watching TV, and next thing you know, he's seeing himself on the screen and he's reliving these terrible memories of the massacre that he's been forced to relive as the core of this episode. So I just thought it was really poignant, really well done. And also, I also love to watch television. I'm not going to deny it. So I have to give Voyager a shout out for this great reference to the 50s and the original golden age of television. So
I've been working on a little surprise for you.
Oh, naughty or nice?
Close your eyes.
I like it already.
Come on. So what do you think?
A television set!
Circa 1956. I replicated the components, but I assembled it myself. This is the remote control. You select what you want to watch by pressing this button.
A slight problem. There were no remote controls in the 1950s.
I took a little poetic license.
Cartoon!
I found them in the ship's database.
Vacuum action!
Mop, mop, don't stop.
What's that?
Now that is called a jingle. According to the research I did, they inserted them into the entertainment programs. I know, it's confusing, but I kept them in for authenticity.
That is awesome. Yeah, you get to know a little bit more about Tom, and also a little bit more about B'Elanna, and that's just a great, when they use the popular culture to illuminate our favorites and make them more relatable. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I guess it's not a big surprise that Tom Paris has been pretty much the core of 3 picks thus far through 3 rounds.
Mr. Popular Culture.
Classic. All right, let's move on to round 2. John, what's your number 2 pick?
Okay, 2. My 5 words were Kirk really can't stand it. And that is because it's Beastie Boys, and it's it was tough because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go Star Trek 2009 reference or Star Trek Beyond, but I thought Beyond, because I think it's a little more integral to the plot in Star Trek Beyond. But I love how they use Beastie Boys in the first film and then bookend that with Star Trek Beyond. When you really look at the lyrics of the song, if you read them as if Kirk is reading them in Star Trek 2009, they're the perfect lyrics. I can't stand it. I know you planned it, but I'm not going to set it straight. This Watergate. There's another pop culture reference.
Oh, there's another Watergate reference. That's right.
I can't stand rocking when I'm in here. Your crystal ball ain't so crystal clear. I mean, you can really get into the sort of metaphor of all of that with him. But if you sing it as Crawl in 2016, every single word, it's not even metaphorical, it's direct. So, when he's talking about your crystal ball ain't so crystal clear, that's Crawl talking about how you guys didn't see the future, and that he sees it clearly, and he sees it as a future where we're weak because we accept everybody and like everybody, and Kirk is arguing the opposite to him. And there's a great line in the song, too, where it says, you'll shut me down with the push of your button, which is exactly what Kirk does, right? Kirk shuts him down with the push of a button, and Jayla also shuts him down with the push of a button. And so the lyrics there really work for, it is an act of sabotage that the crew is doing to Crawl and all of his ships. So I think that's a really great use of that. It's a fun moment. It's I remember the audience reaction when we saw it on opening night. I've been fortunate to go to all the Star Treks on opening night, starting from Wrath of Khan forward, and I clearly remembered when the Enterprise crashed in
Right.
Generations, and the applaud. In fact, they even give you a moment to applaud. I love it when you watch it on home video. When the ship stops, it's just quiet, and that's because they just knew the audience was going to erupt, because that was just an amazing crash. And so, but the audience reaction when they did the song, and then the visual of the ships exploding to the songs, and even the cut back to Yorktown, and then them going, okay, now let's do it, and then they boost the music up right at the right moment and blow, all of them out of the water. The audience just cheering and applauding, and just a really great use of that song because it echoes back to 2009 and the journey that Kirk is on in the film. We see him for the first time with this song in 2009, committing an act of innovation, but for deviant purposes, because he's on the wrong.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Innovation.
I was being nice. boosting a car is what he was doing. Yeah. But he was, but channeling that innovation in the wrong direction. But here we see him now fully as a captain, with earning that role, and him using that innovation to help other people. And I thought that was just a great use of that. I also think Beastie Boys is important because I know that there was a lot of discussion about Discovery being the first use of the F word in Star Trek, but actually it's not. The very first, the very first F word usage was in Star Trek 2009, because they play the entire song. Now in Star Trek Beyond, it's interesting, the two lyrics of the Beastie Boys song where you get the word F in there, where you get the F word in there, is edited out. They skip it, but not in 2009. And so you clearly hear the word. You'll hear it right when, as Kirk passes by, who's really his brother George, who he must have forgot because he calls him Johnny. But they edited out.
That's his nickname.
Yeah,
that's his nickname.
George Johnny Samuel Kirk Jr. But when he passes by Johnny, whoever that is, and says, hey, Johnny, as he passes by, you'll hear the F word, and it's clear, So, yes, Discovery was the first time a character spoke the word on screen, but I always like that because Star Trek is so broad and so big, and it's been around for so long. There really aren't too many firsts left. So anytime I hear a first, I kind of am like, is that really the first? And then that's fun for me to go back and see if it is, then it's like, wow, that's great. And if it isn't, it's like, oh, cool. I never realized that before, but it was here, So that's why I chose that. But I really chose it because I think it really helps us to understand Kirk's journey, and I thought it was a great, if you really listen to the words, it was a great moment for Krall as well and beyond. So it'll be Star Trek Beyond.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. I have so many comments. I love this pick, and you're right. It's not just a throwaway song that they used. It is clearly tied to, first, Kirk's arc in the Kelvin Timeline movies is one of my favorites in all of Trek, and actually I picked it as one of my top 5 epic arcs in an earlier episode of TrekRanks. You've got, this song bookends the beginning and the end of those 3 films in such a distinct, awesome way. So that's first thought. Second, and so not to bring it down. So when I saw Beyond for the first time, I saw it as a screening for the press, and there was no reaction.
Of course.
There was zero reaction to that scene, and I was like, oh my God, I love this. I can't believe it. And after the film, I heard all this cynical snarking and people ripping it, and I'm thinking, oh man, am I just being a kind of a blind Trek fan and I just love this and it's not working or it's not good? And I was like questioning myself, and then when I saw it in the theater on opening night, everybody loved it. And I was like, okay, I'm not wrong. This scene really works. So now let me just move on to really quick. We have a duplicate, and we did not plan this. We had Captain Proton and Satan's Robot in round 5, and we have Sabotage from the Kelvin Timeline and Beyond in round 2 because it is my pick as well. And my 5 words in a hashtag is, this pick's not for you, hashtag if you hate fun. And I wrote that in my Tricorder review of this film. And I just love this moment. I love when Sabotage takes down Kroll's swarm of bees and saves the Yorktown.
Hold steady, Mr. Sula. Brace yourselves, everybody. Spock, stand by to drop out of formation. Scotty, you all queued up back there?
Aye, sir.
Ready to broadcast at 57.7 megahertz.
Made your choice, Lassie?
I have the beat and shouting.
Let's make some noise. That's a good choice.
Faster, Doctor. We risk being consumed by their territorial decay. Damn backseat driver.
It could have easily been my number 1 choice. And the one thing I always say, because there are some people who criticize this scene, that yes, Star Trek Beyond is won by transmitting radio signals into the swarm. And sorry if that's too low tech for you. And I just feel like if you hated that, you went into that film looking to hate it before that scene ever started, because it's just so well executed. Just think they did such a great job with it. So I love how the entire crew is working in that scene. Every single member of the crew has something to do with executing that plan and pulling it off, and then flying toward the Yorktown and the Franklin, just like a classic old Western. So I really just think that scene's perfectly structured and directed, and the tension's just rising throughout it, beat to beat. It's just, I love that scene, and it's a true blessing for Trek that one of the amazingly great songs that you'll ever hear from the Beastie Boys with this incredible kinetic energy is layered into that scene, as well as Trek 2009. It's just perfect. I love it.
Yeah, I think Star Trek Beyond is just brilliant. I'm so sorry it didn't get a novel. I'm still hoping someday, because you say you're never going to get it, but who thought we'd get a Wrath of Khan comic adaptation 25 years later? We did. So you never know, and so I'm hoping that someday we get either I'll even settle for a script book or something where we get notes, because Jayla is I don't know what Quentin Tarantino's plans are, whether we're going to get basically Star Trek 4, but he's going to direct it, or whether he's going to go off in a completely different direction, or what we're going to get. Next Gen rebooted, I have no idea, but I hope that if it is kept when we do have Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, and it's that version, but a 4th film, I really hope Jayla comes back, because I think she is a really important character in the history of Star Trek because of her, what she can represent. The person who's a victim, the person who has this really, really tragic backstory. She's the modern, refugee, the modern, victim of, fill in the blank of what horrible thing could happen, and that happened to her. And we get a little peek of that in the comic. IDW gives us a peek at her background. But yet here she is. She's surviving, and she's strong, and she's not only strong, she's clever and funny, and fits right in, and just has a great way of talking. I mean, there's no diminishing that way she speaks, and how James T. and Montgomery Scotty, and it just endears you right away to her. And I hope that she finds a place on screen again. But there's so much about Beyond, the making of Beyond, that we don't know yet, and what the original script was, because the original script had Kirk and Spock, Shatner and Nimoy apparently in it. I mean, that's in the new Makeup book references that, and so there's this whole other world that I hope gets eventually told, and then also a novel where we can go into the minds of the characters and into the mind of Krall and Jayla and really get to know them better. And so anything like the Beastie Boys where we get some character, I always think is a great thing. And Beyond is just in every way is clever and funny and wonderful and emotional and a great tribute. And, when that picture comes up at the end, I mean, what an amazing moment. It's just a brilliant film.
100% concur. I absolutely love it. It's amazing. And I can't believe we both picked it for level 2. That's fantastic. All right, let's move on to round 1 and hear what your number 1 pop culture reference is.
Okay, this was tough because I did have Beastie Boys there for a few moments, and I moved it out.
Me too.
I did, but I said, it's not, we'll see what people think. Anyway, I put my 5 words are, I do not swing, doctor, and that's actually from a deleted line, but it's the use of blue skies in Nemesis was my number
fantastic.
1. For a whole bunch of reasons. Of course, it's a 1926 song from Irving Berlin, as Worf reminds us with this great line of Irving Berlin. It's also important. It's important to the history of film. So it's not just in Nemesis. It's in The Jazz Singer, which is one of the first talkies ever. So it's really one of the first songs ever heard in cinema. It was reused in Holiday Inn with Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire, and it was even in the movie Patch Adams, which of course swings us back to a Star Trek Enterprise connection with the song, with the title song from Enterprise, Faith of the Heart being in Patch Adams. So there's this whole big connection there. But I thought it was a really important song for 4 reasons, really. One, the fact that Data sings that song as a gift for Riker is another sort of subtle reminder that in the world of Star Trek, materialism doesn't matter. And so his gift isn't a crock pot or, a space age, toaster. His gift is a song. And I thought that was really great, that's a typical kind of Star Trek idea. It also gives you a little bit of a peek into Worf, because of Worf's sort of reaction. There's actually a deleted scene that was in the script. I don't know if they filmed it, but it was definitely in John Logan's original script, where they actually end that sequence in the film as we see it with Data singing the song, and then in the original sort of script construction, they all get up and they dance, and so you see Troy and Riker dancing with one another, but you also see Geordi and Leia Brahms dancing together, because Leia Brahms was in the original script, and you would see Worf and Dr. Crusher dancing. Crusher comes up to Data and says, do you swing? And Data comes up to Worf and says, do you swing? And Worf, who's still hungover, says, I do not swing, doctor. I am unwell. And she says, don't worry, I'm a doctor. And she pulls him onto the dance floor. And that idea of them sort of all dancing together, I wish we would have seen that, where they're all together dancing in that scene.
Right.
But even without that, you get a little peek into Worf and, being raised by humans. And so he knows who Irving Berlin is. And you get the idea that his adoptive parents kind of introduced him to that. But I think most importantly, it's a great moment because it really reveals a bit about the character of Data and also about Picard and Picard's arc throughout that story. So, of course, there's that moment at the end where we get an idea that Data might still be alive because of that song. So that's obviously important. Living within B4, which I'm sure was the original idea there, that we were just going to have Data assume B4. But more importantly, I think it reveals about Picard. And so there's a scene that's deleted that they did film that wasn't included in the original version of the movie, where after the wedding, there's this quiet little chat between Picard and Data, and they talk about the concept of time and passages of time. And when you think about the lyrics of that song, notice the days hurrying by, but when you're in love, my, how time flies. And so Picard kind of regretting that time is going by and that he's losing, Crusher to, the medical, she's going to become head of Starfleet Medical, although that is never mentioned in the film when it's actually put together. But, he's losing Troy and Riker and eventually, of course, loses Data. But this idea of time passage, and of course, then his clone reminding him about what he was like as a youth and how he could have turned out that way, and that he has maybe within him some of those same tendencies as Shinzon. But at the end of the film, coming to a better place, realizing that he is happy, that he's happy that his friends are moving on, that it means that he served them well as a captain. And then that last line, when you're in love, my, how time flies. So of course time is going to fly because he's doing what he loves. And that, so when he's walking out of the room, they carry the melody over Picard as he smiles, and not only smiles because Data may be back perhaps, but smiles because he's where he needs to be, and he's okay with the fact that people are moving on. And so I think that was, again, a brilliant use of a song within Star Trek to get at the theme of what the movie was really about, and requires us to look up the lyrics and to really study them and to think about them. And so anything like that, where they reference Melville, and so you go, I should go back and either watch Moby Dick or read Moby Dick, so I can better understand Wrath of Khan or First Contact. That's all great because it introduces us to kind of classic elements of our own real world culture, but it also illuminates the movie. So for those reasons, I chose that, even though it's a very brief moment in the movie.
Well, it's a great moment in terms of how it connects from the beginning to the end of the film, like you described. Because that moment when he walks out of his ready room and it's kind of playing and then drifts into the Trek theme is super strong. So I love this pick. I had no idea about that history of Blue Skies being a part of the kind of the birth of films in terms of being used. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it was a 1926 song. Actually, it constantly, it's like it doesn't go away, right? So they used it in a play called Betsy. It was a Rogers and Hart play called Betsy, but it was written by Irving Berlin, and then just reused and reused and reused throughout our culture many times.
I love it. That is a great pick, and all those moments you talked about, that scene. It's so frustrating because I know they filmed a lot of the extra, some of those that you mentioned, but it ended up being so cut up in the film, and I just wish we could see a version of that entire.
Yeah,
scene.
I want that original script filmed because I know it would have been a 3-hour Star Trek, but that's okay.
It would have made it all work. It would have made it all work in a much stronger way. So,
absolutely
great. All right, so my number one pick, I'll do my 5 words in a hashtag, which will give it away right away. The Phoenix goes to warp, hashtag, with a magic carpet ride liftoff. And, of course, it's Star Trek First Contact, which is my number 2 film at TrekRanks. I love this movie. And the scene is, let's rock and roll. It's Zephyr Cochrane who pilots the Phoenix to Steppenwolf. And this scene just totally works. It's really unbelievable for me. To be clear, I'm not a big fan of 70s anthem rock or Steppenwolf in any way, but the song placement here is just the perfect choice. I just love the thought of Zephyr Cochrane scrambling before they're taking off, getting everybody on edge to find this disc to play some 90-year-old rock song from the U.S. before the Phoenix can take off. And I love that it adds some really good energy to the scene, which is already a pretty amazing scene. And again, the lyrics for this song just match perfectly with how big a moment that is in mankind's history. So, just for some reason that moment always stood out to me, and I love that song in that place. It's kind of short and sweet. I don't have much more to say, but I just love that moment. Any take there, John?
Yeah, that's a great example of that's a great pick, and I think that that's a great example of what we were talking about at the start, where so this is supposed to be our future, not as far in advance as Next Gen normally is, but It's supposed to be 100 years or so, after World War III and all of that, when they're meeting Zefram Cochrane. But to give it an anchor to say, no, that is us. That this is us.
Yeah.
They play a song from the 70s, right? So you get that through line that, okay, this is that reinforces the idea that the world of Zefram Cochrane, in addition to the world of Picard, because I get the feeling that Riker recognizes that song, so he doesn't say like, "What is that?" He says
Right.
he says, "Turn it down," but he doesn't say,
Right.
what is that?" And then obviously, you see that in Beyond too, where they're like, "That's classical music, isn't it?" I mean, so they recognize they recognize it as that. But I think that's great at grounding Star Trek in our future, which I think is really why Star Trek is so special and in a way different than, many science fiction is set in our future, but not so much that kind of vision of what Star Trek is. And for 700 and now 30 something episodes, when we add in Discovery, 13 movies with a 14th apparently on the way. I mean, it's such a huge world in terms of what that vision is like of what our future is going to be. And so I think when you have that song there, it works, like you said, perfectly for that moment, but also works to go, don't forget, these are your great grandchildren, and this is what's going to happen to them.
Good summary. All right, so let's go through a couple of secondary systems picks really quick. Do you have any off the top of your head that just missed your list?
Oh yeah, I mean there's so many. One was I like the use of Billie Holiday. I really took it off the list because I was afraid I had too much music on there. But Billie Holiday's music in Enterprise's episode Stormfront, where it's sort of played. Yeah. It's played as a message, which is yes, it's in an alternate 1940s, but that's really what has happened in history, right? I mean, when you go back to spirituals during slavery, or even swing music being used during the 40s in Nazi Germany as a way to carry messages. I mean, there was that has been done before, and I thought that was a really great, nice moment in Enterprise. But it did. The only reason it didn't make it was because I said, "Oh, I got so many music picks." I love the "I Love Lucy" reference in Carbon Creek on Enterprise. Where Mistral does it for obvious reasons, because Lucy is so important to the history of Star Trek.
That was I had that listed as my toughest cut, which was that obviously cool, awesome shout out to Lucille Ball.
Yeah, that was awesome. I love it.
And the birth of Trek, and I love that. I Love Lucy is canon.
Yeah, so I love it. It exists, right? It's true. I love the kind of subtle Back to the Future reference in Hollow Pursuits when Barclay says, "I knew about the flux capacitor," which wasn't scripted as flux capacitor, but he says it as flux capacitor. But I didn't need to hear about it from some 17-year-old kid, which you don't know. Is he referring to Wesley or is he referring to Marty McFly?
I never thought of that. That's great.
And then I love the Battlestar Galactica reference to Ovions in Flesh and Blood, Voyager, where there is a species called Ovions who are hexapodic, which means they have 6 arms, which exactly like the Ovions in Battlestar Galactica.
Never picked up on that. I love
that. And then then there's then of course Morn being Norm from Cheers. You love that reference.
Yep.
And then I love the Akudagram stuff, and so I didn't include any of that only because you had to, you probably couldn't see it back then because of the quality of our televisions back then. But now you have to sort of pause. But my favorite Akudagram of all time is that there is an Enterprise D shuttle named the Indiana Jones. I love that. So Indiana Jones is real, and at least as a film series in the world of Star Trek. So those were ones that I thought of adding.
All right, that's a fantastic secondary system. I had we mentioned it before. I had Enterprise movie night. Mm-hmm. I loved how broad the choices were there. Could be anything: Sunset Boulevard to The Day the Earth Stood Still to Rosemary's Baby to all the Frankenstein movies. So I love those references. I like Voyage Home and Future's End. Basically, those are entire 2-hour long pop culture references. So didn't pick anything from there. And then special shout outs to Amelia Earhart. I love it. I mean, she's as 20th century pop culture as it gets. And she was in Star Trek. So
yeah, and a great counterpoint to Janeway, who is the Amelia Earhart of our fictional world.
Exactly. And then I mentioned, you mentioned the Bada Bing, Bada Bang and the DS9, the gambling. I had to give a special shout out to Vic Fontaine because I mean, are you kidding me with I've said this a few times, but what the producers, and I basically mean Ira Stephen Bear, but what they accomplished with this character is basically impossible. I mean, at the end of season 6 of the most layered, dense Star Trek show ever, they're seamlessly weaving in a crooning holodeck singer from the Brat Pack era, and they made him one of the show's most popular characters. It's crazy. It should have never worked in a million years, but at 100% perfection, it works. I love that.
And it was beautiful. And then we got that great album of that.
Love that album
James Darren did, where it's all songs from it. So that whole album is a pop culture. Absolutely.
Those James Darren standards are fantastic. So, all right. I knew this was going to be a fantastic topic. So many great picks. Let's move on to our regeneration cycle and wind this episode down.
Computer, activate regeneration cycle. Alcoves beta and gamma.
All right, so let's run through a quick recap of our choices, and I'll pop in on a few statistics for our 10 picks. So, John, what were your 5 picks?
So my 5 picks were number 5 was Bride of Chaotica because of Captain Proton. 4 was the use of gambling in Star Trek with the episode Bada Bing, Bada Bang. Number 3 was Alice in Wonderland references with the episode Shore Leave. Number 2 was Beastie Boys, use of that in Star Trek Beyond. And my number 1 was Blue Skies, Data singing that in Nemesis.
Awesome. So you had one representative each from TOS, TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and the Kelvin timeline. I love it. So no Enterprise or Discovery, but one each. That's fantastic. My top 5 were Satan's Robot from Voyager's Night, and A British Tar, the song sung in Insurrection from Gilbert and Sullivan for TNG. My number 3 pick was the TV set that B'Elanna gifts to Tom Paris in Voyager's Memorial. My number 2 pick, same as John, was the use of Sabotage by the Beastie Boys in Beyond from the Kelvin timeline. And my number 1 pick was Magic Carpet Ride from Star Trek First Contact in TNG. So I had 2 TNG picks, 2 Voyager picks, and 1 Kelvin timeline pick. So I was not as spread out there. So overall, the numbers we had, basically everybody was repped. There was no ENT, no Enterprise picks, and no Discovery picks. But we had 1 TOS pick, 1 DS9 pick, 2 Kelvin timeline picks, and 3 each from TNG and Voyager. And if we're breaking down categories, we had 5 songs picked. So I kind of knew that would be heavy. I had 3, you had 2. We had 3 1950s references. There was 1 book, 3 Tom Paris picks, and we had 1 awesome duplicate, which I'm pretty fired up that we had that in the same round. So that was great. So, all right. As we do every week, we've once again entered a temporal causality loop. So before we can depart, it's time to hear from you.
The Enterprise has been caught up in a temporal causality loop, and I suspect that something similar may have happened to you.
All right, so this week's temporal causality loop is a special one. Why? Because we got a voicemail. I love getting voicemails from you guys. So it's an awesome list of top 5 scenes and a turbo lift from Debbie, who is on Twitter at SilverDoe25. So we're going to play that for you right now.
Hey, TrekRanks. My name's Debbie. On Twitter, my handle is SilverDoe25. I'm calling to leave my list for top 5 turbo lift moments. My Prime Directive is always what first comes to my mind because I listen to most of my podcasts while commuting in the car. So here are my top 5 turbo lift moments. Number 5 is from Star Trek 2009 I don't know how to describe it other than Spock in the turbo lift. It occurs timestamp 39 minutes, 43 to 53 seconds. It is simply Spock getting in the turbo lift and then getting back out again on the bridge. And there's something about the production value of this. You know how the scene was filmed, but they totally gave the impression that he was in a turbo lift moving within a ship. I just love it, along with the score. Number 4, Deep Space Nine, the Forsaken, Lwaxana and Odo stuck in the turbo lift, and really that moment when Odo finally allows himself to go back to his natural form. Number 3, TNG, Best of Both Worlds, Riker and Shelby in the turbo lift. Nothing more to say on that. Number 2, another TNG from Disaster, Picard and the kids stuck in the turbo lift, and the moments that how Picard learned how to deal with kids there. And finally, my number 1 pick from Deep Space Nine, Trials and Tribulations, Bashir and O'Brien in the turbo lift, and Bashir going on about how I might be my own great-grandfather. I love his speech, but I also love the look on O'Brien's face and how he just thinks that Bashir's out of his mind. Thanks a lot, you guys. I really love the show. Bye.
Such an awesome voicemail. And I have to say her number 5 pick might be my favorite of all the picks we received. It's that moment where Spock is moving up to the bridge for the first time in Star Trek 2009. He starts on a lower deck. He gets in the turbo lift, and then he gets out on the bridge all in one very, very cool, smooth tracking shot that is so worthy of inclusion on any top 5 scenes in a turbo lift. So we love that moment. Super cool. Remember that one, John?
Oh, gosh. That's fantastic. Great choice. Great choice.
Yeah, such a great pick. So, all right. So we got a lot of awesome lists submitted to us on Twitter. Some amazing picks. I'm going to highlight just a couple more here in addition to Debbie's great voicemail. So obviously we got a lot of love for Riker and Shelby in Best of Both Worlds, and Picard with the kids in Disaster. And surprisingly, one of the more popular picks was Picard having the roof come down on him in the turbo lift in Night Terrors. So I thought that was interesting. We had multiple picks for that. In terms of the other great standout picks, I want to give a shout out to Adam Hunault at Adam Hunault on Twitter, and Bill Mann, who's at TrekFan4387, both past hosts of TrekRanks. They both chose for their the turbolift scene from Amok Time with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, where Spock lets them know that his closest friends can attend the ceremony on Vulcan, and he asked McCoy to go. And we missed that one on the show. That's the beauty of TrekRanks. You go through a 2-hour talk about scenes from a turbolift, and that one never came up. And no doubt it is one of the great all-time scenes in a turbolift or anywhere in Trek history, because it's just amazing. So, all right. And one other quick shout out to my favorite outlier pick, and that was from Michael Conrad at Avenue Pad, PAD on Twitter. And his pick was from Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. And it's the scene where Kirk is being denied the use of the Enterprise to go look for Spock, and he is stepping into a turbo lift with Sulu and Chekhov, and Sulu says, "The word, sir?" And Kirk says, "The word is no. I am therefore going anyway." Classic Kirk, and such a great pick. I love that topic. It's one of our favorite shows. You should listen to it if you haven't. So, all right. So with picks that good, we've once again pulled ourselves out of this week's temporal causality loop. So as always, I want to thank everyone again for all the amazing responses to TrekRanks. Keep the list coming to me at TrekRanks so we can retweet them. And also we want to hear from you. So please put together your own list of top 5 pop culture references and give us a call. Tell us your list. It's easy. Call us at the Tricorder Transmissions at 609-512-5527. That's 609-512-LLAP. Did you hear Debbie's list a few minutes ago? That could be you. That was awesome. So as I like to say, opinions are like Katras. Everybody has one. So give us a call and tell us your list. We know you want to. So it only takes a couple of minutes. 609-512-LLAP. All right. Hopefully we'll hear from you on the next episode of Trek Ranks. And on the next episode of Trek Ranks, we're going to go with a little more tried and true topic of Trek. And we are going to do our top 5 2-part episodes. So pretty simple definition. So I think it's going to be a fun topic for our panel, just to go through what is no doubt will be some of the all-time great episodes in Trek history. Although it's going to be tough to narrow down. So John, anything jumping out at you straight away as what would be on your top 5 2-part episodes list?
Oh, well, I definitely would put Menagerie, because
I love it.
Number one, it also helps us now with thinking of Discovery and Spock. It seems like the Sarek family likes to mutiny by Vulcan neck pinch. Seems to be the way that they all do it. But I love the way that Gene Roddenberry said, "Let's not waste this." $600,000 pilot, and just brilliant story. And it could have been such a throwaway thing, and instead crafts this great story around what's already a great story with the cage. And just we get to know Kirk and Spock so much better in those episodes, and so, I love that.
What I always say is that, right there, I think it's episode 8 or 9. It's like 10 episodes into TOS. You're getting the first indication of, hey, this show is layered, it's long-term, it's connective. It's unbelievable that was right there at the beginning. And here 50 years later, we still have all these connections and continuity, and the way every series, touches the ones before. That episode says it all. I love that pick.
Yeah, I'm amazed at to put myself back, I would have loved to have seen that with the age I am now back in the 60s, and not knowing that what the cage was, or that there had been an episode called The Cage. And I could just imagine what it was like to watch that episode when it was first on and go, oh my God, look how did they do that? Right? How did they de-age? Like Spock looks a little younger, actually looks a little younger, and the ship looks different. And, it's incredible. And the effects and the costumes, and I just thought it was Roddenberry, in many ways, Roddenberry at his best. Yeah,
I love it. And my other favorite thing about it is that for about half the episode, it's just Kirk and Spock sitting around watching Star Trek on TV.
That's right.
And I love it, because that's my favorite thing to do.
That's right.
All right. So that should be another great episode. All right. So before we close out here, just a huge thanks once again to John Tenuto, one of the classier guests we'll ever have on our show. And just wow, you brought a lot to this topic. So many layered, informative takes on these picks. So I hope you had fun, man.
I did. Thanks, Jim. I really appreciate it. And thanks for doing the show, because I think, there's so much negativity in a way with the way the world is today with social media and about things that many of us love. And I love that your podcast is always one that, people can disagree and debate, but it's the way it's supposed to be, where we disagree and we debate because we love this, and there is no right or wrong. And I think that that's just a great, really doing a great service in a way. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate
it. I can't wait. I want to see what the 2-parters are next time. So
yeah, that's going to be a tough one. I'm already regretting it. I'm going to change my mind. We're going to do something else. There's no way I can narrow that down to 5. It's going to be brutal.
Just Voyager alone is going to have a
so that's what I should do. I should break it down by series. All right, you'll find out if I change my mind or not, people. All right. Thanks, John, man. Really appreciate having you on. We'll have you on again soon. So
thanks.
And thanks again for everyone engaging with us here again on episode 17 of the Trek Ranks podcast. As always, I want to close by saying I'm looking forward to standing with you again here in this place where I belong.
I've got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow. Got the string around my finger. What a world, what a life, I'm in love. I've got a song that I sing, I can make the rain go anytime I move my finger. Lucky me, can't you see I'm in love? Life is a beautiful thing, as long as I hold that string. I'd be a silly so-and-so if I should ever let it go. I've got the world on a string, sitting on a rainbow. Got the string around my finger. What a world, what a life, I'm in love. Life is a beautiful thing.
Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are rating a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.